Welcome, everyone, to session number 6 on mindfulness of thoughts. I'm calling this one the illusion of trust in relationships. So we're continuing with this relationship theme. We can keep doing this. We may have to call it mindfulness of relationships, but I really do see this thoughts and relationship as inextricably linked and intertwined. So I'm just to reflect a little bit on last session, I invited you to do that exercise where you took one person that you might have held judgments and criticisms about, someone that you come in contact on a regular basis, but that you have a lot of judgments about if that person actually exists. And if that person does exist, then for one day, when you're with this person, try noticing the judgments and the criticisms and not believing them. Just seeing them as just that bare experience arising, just a thought arising, and fading. So that was the invitation. So basically, when the judgment or criticisms arise, you don't solidify on it. You simply notice it. And not solidifying, I mean, you don't think about it more or speak it. So if you played around with that exercise, I'll at the end open it up for some. I'd be curious about how it went. It's always an interesting exercise to actually do. And if you forgot, or if you forgot or didn't do it for some reason, then I invite you to kind of revisit it, because it can really have this it can be a breakthrough, an insight, just with thoughts, simply engaging in that practice for a day. Or if you want to go longer with it, by all means, it's the insights will continue. So last week, I touched upon the notion that our relationship difficulties arise from believing the thought that someone should be different than they are. And that's how I see the thoughts and relationships so interlinked. Simply so simple. Just believing the thought that this person should be different than they are. And of course, they can't be any different than they are, just as we can't be any different than we are. So that's really the first step. And I spoke about how this first step is acknowledging this, really, that this is what we're doing. We want something. I think I said, it's not so much I love you as I need you. I want something from you. There's an agenda here. I expect you to fulfill this agenda, this desire, whatever it might be, for security, some kind, to cover over a core fear. And that's, if we really look, we can acknowledge that this is the foundation of the vast majority of relationships. Of course, if we're not aware and conscious of that. So that's the first step. We want others to make us feel happy, loved, appreciated. So that that's our agenda. So acknowledging that is the first step. And our relationships go off the rails. We have difficulties in relationships when those expectations aren't met, when the person doesn't make us feel happy, loved, or appreciated, and so on. That's when we have relationship problems. We think they made a promise to be a certain way and they did not. So that creates a problem. And I'd like to talk today about how that's all an illusion. The fact that we lose trust in a person when they break this perceived promise, is all an illusion. You could say losing trust in someone comes from fear. Fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear of being abandoned, fear of inadequacies, being seen. It always comes from fear. So this appearance of broken trust, it appears when this expectation that someone will protect us from our core fears is not met. We have this expectation, this person, this relationship will protect me in some way from my core fears. And if that person doesn't live up to that perceived promise or agenda, then there's the appearance of broken trust. In fact, we kind of see ourselves as having the right to expect people to protect us in this way, to protect us from our core fears. You notice that? Like this person, they didn't live up to the bargain here. I really expected them to be there and help me cover over this core fear. And this is what we call trust. I trust that this person will behave in a particular way and make me feel a particular way. And what I'm saying will get a little tricky for the egoic mind, because the egoic mind says, yeah, but it is important that people are honest, and I have this trust that people will be honest. And of course, I'm not saying that you can't have those kinds of. I'm not speaking at that kind of relative level. I'm speaking at a more fundamental, absolute level, you could say. And in this way, trust is simply an illusion created in the mind, an illusion that a relationship, that a person can protect us from our fears, and also something that we might talk about more next week, and that a relationship is static. I was thinking about this before I sat down for the group tonight. We think they're somehow static and reliable. And then in this way that the person will protect us from our core fears, and they'll continue to do this. Is there some permanence to that? Happening. So it's a fabricated illusion of the world whereby our desire for security and happiness is met in a relationship. Are you with me on this so far? Because this can be hard to absorb. When we say, I trusted him, her, they, but I can never trust them again. What are we actually saying? That person broke my trust. What are we actually saying? What fabricated illusion of them can't we trust anymore? It's one way to look at it. What kind of illusion did I have? What image did I have? Did I create of them that I can't trust anymore? What illusion of want in me is not being met by that illusion of them? You can see it's just illusion piled on top of an illusion. You have this illusion of this need, and then you have an illusion of this other person actually meeting this illusion. So let's take the last part of that, the fabricated illusion of the other person. Do we see them as they actually are? Or do we see them as we actually are? Right? Do you see that other person as they actually are? Or is it a lot of perception, projection, if you use a more psychological term? So you can even ask it just a basic, where does this image of the other person come from? This image that they're going to somehow protect us from our core fears, and that image of that they can actually do that. Where does this image, what I'm calling illusion, but just think of it, where does this image come from? That very basic level, kind of explore. You take a person that you know, you'll probably come up with some image of that person. Where does that come from? Because it's this fabricated notion of them that we can't trust anymore. And that is when it's kind of perceived as being broken in some way. So can you really see that you're not seeing the person as they actually are? Really look deeply and say, really acknowledge and see that you're not seeing this person as they actually are. You're seeing them as you are. You're seeing them through this range of believed thoughts, expectations, perceptions, projections. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing through this filter that you have and create an image. So when you see the thought, I can't trust this person anymore, which is really the same as saying you were not the person I thought you were, or you're not the person I met. This is a signal to wake up and look. This is a little ding, a little mindfulness bell. We had a couple of those kind of last week as well in terms of relationship. It's another kind of signal to wake up, to look, and to see what's happening. So of course they're not the same. They're not the same. They never were going to be the same, and they're not even what you imagine them to be. And even if you had, let's say you had a fairly accurate image of them, even though you have all these projections and believed thoughts and filters, and even if you had just a fairly accurate image of them, they're not static. They're changing, they're impermanent, they're changing like everything else. So of course they're not ever going to be the same as even a semi-accurate image. So the chances of having an accurate image are very small. And then the fact that even if you did have that accurate image, it would be shifting and changing so much. People are very dynamic and constantly shifting. You probably see that if you're coming to this kind of a group, you're seeing that in yourself as you hear these teachings and you practice these kind of insights and shifts happen. So there's no sense of permanency or things being static. So they can never be reliable. Can never be reliable. So I'll just sum it up a bit here. So you have a limited view of another person based on believed thoughts and projections. It's limited, it's in the mind. You have the expectation that this illusion that you've created, or this image that you've created, can meet your needs and protect you from your fears. And when this doesn't happen, you believe you can't trust them anymore. Yeah, that summed it up okay. Yeah, it's kind of three steps, I guess. You have this limited image, it's illusory image based on your thoughts and projections, expectations, thoughts and projections. And you have, based on that, you have expectations that this illusion or this image that you've created can somehow meet your needs and protect you, provide security, protect you from your core fears. And when this doesn't happen, you believe that you can't trust them anymore. So if you really look at that, it's really the egoic self's requirement that life should conform to this, to these fear-based images, really, and that these requirements are somehow permanent. So you can perhaps see how this is a recipe for pain and suffering in life. A little story to maybe illustrate a little bit of this. Years ago, I had a very, very close friend. And suddenly they seemed to be pulling away. And I saw us as best friends, and thought that we would be best friends for life. There's a kind of expectation of permanency in that. And the more I believed, I kind of had these thoughts, oh, I must have done something wrong. I kind of run, oh, did I say that? Is that what did it? Or did I do this? And it's kind of always, I went through this process of what did I do? What did I do for him to pull away like that? And so the more I did this, the more fearful I became. I was starting to react from fear, a deep fear of kind of being alone. This fear of being alone. So this triggered a deep fear-based collection of belief thoughts that just kind of cascaded. And all I could do is watch this occur. I remember one event when we had made plans to go out and go for a drink and watch a band play. And when I went to pick him up, he said he had already made plans. So I found myself really caught in that moment, and for a few days, really caught in this intense fear-based reaction based in fear and expectations. And that's, I think, that story where where I really saw a sense of there's a trust has been broken here. So that sense of trust had solidified so much that when it didn't meet my expectations, things were thrown into chaos. It was very, very shaken. So I looked and saw, I was practicing at the time. I looked and saw these fear-based thoughts arising. I started to be able to kind of just notice the thoughts, and then I came to the practice of breathing into the heart space. And the guided meditation that I offered comes from that, from my practice in those moments, breathing into the heart space and noticing the fear-based thoughts that were arising. And I practiced this way for a few days, and it was fairly intense practice. I kind of thought 2 days, I was kind of almost wearing myself out practicing with it. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go out for dinner with a friend and do something else rather than practice with this. But I kind of thought, I'll just put this aside for a while, and I'll do something that's nourishing. And it was it wasn't me. I didn't see it as running away because I had the intention to continue to practice with it. I just kind of simply felt the need to put it aside for an evening and come back later. So I point that out because sometimes you need to do that too, right? Bring that kind of compassionate element to it. And it's not this kind of, just bear it and plow through the practice. So that was, I remember that being very helpful. And I went back to practicing with it again. And I began to see that I was really holding on to a lot of illusions of trust. And that's what I called it. I expected my friend to protect me from this deep fear of being alone. And so I suffered until I could see that it was based on this collection of thoughts. And then I could really, and I found too, as I saw that for what it was, I could connect it at a much deeper level into the big heart. I could see I could feel the barriers in the heart, the human heart, I guess you could say, start to come down, and an openness emerge. And then, of course, I found out from sometime later that he felt really bad that we had drifted away. He wanted nothing more than to reconnect. So it was, it was interesting that in the end that's how it all transpired. So that's I hope that kind of illustrates, I guess, what can happen, and then a process that we can kind of play with and work through when this arises. I think as we practice in this way, we get to a place where we develop fewer and fewer filters, fewer and fewer kind of projections and fear-based thoughts about other people. And we can trust other people to be as they are. So there can really be a trust in relationships. We trust that people will be as they are. We move away from the illusion of trust towards a trust rooted in knowing things can only be as they are. And we can begin to be with life as it is. And of course, as we do that, the barriers and the protective layers we've created, they just dissolve and dissolve and dissolve. And the big heart radiates. We can only have true relationships, whether it be friendships or whether it be intimate relationships, when we connect at this deeper level with the level of our essential nature, rather than at the personal level or the egoic level. So you can see we're touching our core pain in this kind of stuff, right? Working with relationships really, I think, is so powerful because we're getting right down into our core pain, our deepest fears, really, that we've relied on others to help to cover over for us, the relationship to cover over. So seeing and touching core pains can be challenging, right? So taking a time out is often wise. And it's challenging because our believed thoughts seem so justified at the time, right? Seem so believable. I can even tell this story to another friend and they'll justify it back to me. Have you ever done that? Share your illusory collection of belief thoughts with another so you get comfort. Yeah, that's terrible what they did, and I can see why you don't trust them. So then, the egoic mind goes, yeah, there, it's all confirmed, and it, of course, just solidifies more and more the illusion. I can remember many times doing that, and I think back, and it's actually funny. Even our anger and resentment can seem justified, right? It can seem very justified. And we forget that it's got nothing to do with them. It's all about ourselves. When you're telling that story, or when you're listening to one, you're not hearing a story about another person. You're telling a story about yourself. It's not about the other person at all. It's only about yourself. It's only about ourselves. That's so critical to see that this is, as Sylvia Ornstein says, it's all an inside job. It's all an inside job. So we're really back to working with thoughts, right? That connection again. We're back to working with these believed thoughts. What thoughts do you believe around relationships, around other people? And we're kind of moving away from jumping to blame and reaction, and instead seeing and labeling the believed thoughts that are arising. That's it. When you see the believed thoughts, and at the same time, as I said, opening to the heart space. And if that doesn't work for you, you can open to the body as the whole body, or whatever. As I've told you before, I've done some chakra training, and the heart space it's not just a place in the body. It's actually got a physical connection, I think, with our big heart. This loving kindness that is our nature. My sense is it. I can sense into it in the chest, in the heart space. So play around with that. If it doesn't work for you, try something else. But seeing and labeling the belief thoughts and having some kind of body awareness simultaneously is really what I'm getting at. Try the chest, the heart space. See how that works. What's felt there. I think that's probably enough on the illusion of trust. So I'll open it up to any questions or comments for the very dedicated practitioners that came on a beautiful Thursday, July evening. Yes, you want to?
Stephen, thank you for that. Hi, everyone. Of course, I have a story and a question. So, my story is actually many, many years ago. I had a situation, I won't go into detail because it's not important, where my trust with someone was very deeply broken, and there was betrayal and all this kind of stuff. And I fell into a very deep depression. And it was only until, years later, after a lot of practice and everything, that I discovered that my worth and my value was very intrinsic to that person. So my story and my narrative was, that person lied to me, therefore I am not valuable. therefore I am not worthy. That's what that meant. And as long as they stayed telling the truth to me, I stayed valuable and worthy. And the moment they didn't, then I wasn't anymore. And then years later, I've had many therapists. One of my therapists said that I'm a validation addict. And I was like, that's rude. But she was right. I did realize that I was very much, for lack of a better word, addicted to external validation. Everybody else telling me all the things that, for lack of a better expression, that we should know from within ourselves, that I am worthy, tell me that from the outside, etc. Anyway, so I am at a point, and I hear what you're saying, the illusory image, the expectations, and then you believe you can't trust them, and I'm all on board with that. And every time I meet somebody, whether it be a friendship or whatever it is, I do find these things coming up, and I'm like, oh, that's what it is, and then I let them dissolve again. But my question is, so say hypothetically, we do make a connection, a friendship, a business relationship, whatever, and we do discover that the person is being dishonest, lying, whatever you want to call it. So I know that if that happens to me, it won't affect me in the same way, because I knew why it was happening to me in the first place, the discomfort that I had. But do we just go, okay, that's that person's nature. I see, I accept them for who they are. They're a person who likes to tell untruths, and then just continue that way? Is it okay to go, oh, maybe that doesn't jive with me? I mean, how do we react to that? We just accept that people are not honest? I mean, you know what I mean? Like it may not affect me in the same way, but I'm still aware of it. And in that awareness, we just go, oh, that's just part of their nature. That's cool. I guess that's my question for you. Thank you.
I'd be interested in other people's responses, but my response would simply be to let go and move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know sometimes you can't do that if it's in an organizational context, but I just would move on in terms of spending time with other people. Yeah, we'll still relate, and at that relative level, there is still the notion of trusting that somebody's going to be honest, and there's all those elements of, and then that's all fine. That's all part of our life manifesting in the world, and that will continue. But when we see past the illusion of it, as you mentioned, it just is, right? It's just that person being as they are in that moment. And perhaps they'll change. What's that? Ulcers, zebras don't lose their stripes, or in ulcers. There's some book about things that they don't change. I think people change constantly. Yeah, I think people change constantly. So I'm always, if somebody does something that's kind of, it's like a lying or harming in some way, then, I move on. But then I'm always willing to kind of go back and say, oh, how are you today? I don't say like, are you still lying, telling lies? But it's kind of, there's people do change, and I've noticed that. So it's not like a giving up. It's just kind of moving on at that moment, at that time. That's, I guess, how I would answer the question. Yeah.
I'd have a comment, Joanna. I think we have so many needs and holes to be patched that we cannot possibly accept a single person to have the right bucket of polyfilla for each hole every day. I think it's important to recognize that some people are good at pulling joints, some at pulling polyfilla, and we need them all from day to day. So it's probably to recognize that, yes, they cannot do all the repairs that we need them to do on us, but they can do some. And to recognize, well, this one is good at polyfill. So I need polyfill, I call John. Peter is good at pulling joints, and somebody else is good at fixing lights. And I think because to expect somebody to feel everything at the same time at the right moment, it's almost impossible, I guess. And also to guess what we're going to need, because we expect them to. We expect them to know that tomorrow I'm going to need this repair, and to expect them to show up with the right tools. Well, that's it's way too much, right? I mean, I thought about your exercise, Stephen, and of course I extended the friend with the comments to other people that we don't call friends, but relationships, like politicians, for instance. Like Putin doesn't behave the way I want him to, nor Trudeau, nor whatever. And then I disappointed because they don't do this thing right. They don't ask me for my opinion. I mean, no wonder I suffer, because there's all these people that have power to do things in the world, but somehow they're incompetent and they don't do things the right way, the way I would have done them. So I went into that, and I realized that no wonder I suffer. I mean, I have my own ideas that I believe in, and most of them, they don't behave, and they are not the person that I expected them to. So, but it's not their problem, it's my problem.
Mhm.
Yeah, I didn't do the exercise, Stephen, but I think subconsciously it was working in there because I've been doing a lot of reflecting around this issue. And thinking about, what's coming to mind now is that I think that, it's been my experience that I've spent most of my life thinking either, some things are just too much. So, this person's just too much, or they're not good enough, or, and I apply those things, especially the good enough part, to myself a lot as well. And, I realized that today, it's basically, I didn't realize this today, but I came up with kind of an analogy came to me today, is that it's kind of like, I have these criteria and I'm expecting everyone to show up, like everyone's going to be like this, like God-like unconditioned thing, that, like a Goldilocks kind of, like on a unicorn showing up, like every person is going to be that in my life. And the funny thing is they actually are. They actually already are those things. It's just the ego doesn't have all the information. I feel like the ego only has a few bits and pieces. And then once I can get into that spot where of the, that quietness, like that big heart, it's then I can see that. I can see that, like, oh yeah, that person needs to be exactly like that right now. Like, it's just perfect the way they are. Like, and it all just really comes down to like what we were talking about last week with preferences versus desires. Like, it's okay to have a preference. Like, I like people who, don't like to go out and party at, and go to wild. I prefer people that are, more like down, kind of maybe more, just like small gatherings and stuff. But ultimately, there's nothing wrong with the other people that love to go out and party too. It's just a preference. But it's when you move, I feel when I move from that preference to it actually being a strict desire, then I attach to it. And that becomes the issue. And yeah, the ego just can't see everything. Like it just picks like a few little bits and pieces to kind of create a story. And I thought too of like the story of like the Taoist farmer. You know, have you heard that one? It's like he has a son, or he has a horse, and this Taoist farmer has a horse, and the horse runs away, and now he doesn't have a horse, and all the neighbors are like, "Oh, you must be so sad. You know, the horse, your only horse ran away." And he's like, "We'll see, we'll see." He's all calm, you know. And then a few days later, the horse comes back with like 10 wild horses. So now he has 11 horses, and now he can train these horses to like, and maybe sell them. And the neighbors are like, "Oh, you must be so happy now that you have all these horses." And he's like, "We'll see, we'll see." And then a few days later, his son's like training one of the horses, and he falls off the horse and breaks his leg. And then the neighbors are like, "Oh my God, that's awful. You must feel so bad." And he's like, "We'll see." And then in a couple of days, the army comes through town, and they're forcing all the young men to undergo conscription into the army, and most of them will probably die. And his son got passed by because he had a broken leg. So I feel like that's kind of what life is like. We just don't know what's going to happen next. So, and the ego can't see that. But I feel like we get into those quiet spots where we're in touch with that big heart, then we can see it. And that's when we know that everything's just okay right now. It's pretty, that's all I have to say.
You said an interesting sentence in the middle there that, oh, and thanks for that, the Taoist story. That's a good one about, maybe yes, maybe no. You just don't know. You said, when I touch the quiet place, I can see people as they are. That was a very profound sentence. It actually, I missed what you said after it for about 30 seconds because it was just so cutting, direct. You're so direct. And what's arising right now is, I think it's our deepest nature to go into to touch the silence within, right? And we touch our essential nature by touching that silence that's always there. But I think that it's also our essential nature to want to connect, right? To be in relationship with people, with the world. And I think we have this kind of relationship and silence. And I think this practice is so much about both of those, right? Like how we connect with our deepest nature, and from that seeing, how that brings us into relationship in the world. Yeah, that sentence sparked kind of a cascade of insights, you could say, just in that moment. So thank you for that.
Just one other thing is, we were talking about that, if someone lied to us and stuff, like, I was just thinking, Stephen, with your response, like, where you just kind of just let it go, and, you see the guy the next day and you're like, "How are you doing?" Like, it's that kind of response that's going to actually, I feel, maybe it's like giving the person a totally different reaction than they've always probably had from people. And that's a chance for them to maybe start to chip away at all those layers of samsara to see their own true nature, which I think that kind of response it's so needed right now.
Did any believed thoughts come up in that silence? I think I'll end it there. And again, thank you for coming. I appreciate your presence. It is difficult on these beautiful, there's not that many of them in so many in this part of the world. And so I really do a deep bow to each of you for taking this hour and a half and coming and practicing in this way together. I think you must know that well, it's one of the three jewels, right? Is coming together in a community like this is one of the three jewels of the practice, and can be missing from many people's lives and their Dharma practice. So yeah, thank you for coming. And I hope to see you next week. We'll probably talk about relationships some more. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. Maybe it'll be something different, but we'll see what comes up. If you have any ideas, also feel free to let me know. So take care, everyone, and welcome back, Ken. And good to see you, Jadzia. I haven't seen you in a while, so it's also a big hello and welcome. I hope to see you again. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thanks.
guys.
Bye, everybody.
Nice to see you
Bye.
all. Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Stephen, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.